So this is Fionnuala from Ireland. She has an absolutely remarkable story. We just met the other day in the tea shop, and it's just absolutely remarkable. I don't think I've ever heard of any miracle taking place like this. So Fionnuala, would you mind starting with your story, with your connection with Medjugorje, or your devotion to Our Lady?
Devotion to Our Lady, I will start with. When I was a very young child, maybe 3 or 4 years of age, Our Lady was my imaginary friend growing up. I could say the rosary when I was 4, 5. I would say the rosary when I'd be going to school on the bus. I would say the rosary coming home on the bus. 6 and 7 years of age, I may be saying 5 or 6 rosaries a day. Our Lady always protected me. She went everywhere with me. She brought me to school and she brought me home from school. I have 8 brothers and 1 sister. And when I was 16 years of age, my sister was 15. I had 5 brothers older than me, and I had then my sister. I was born, then my sister a year later, and then 3 more brothers. And we were going to a friend's house one night bringing Christmas presents. It was 2 days before Christmas, and we brought our younger brother with us. He was 10 years old, and we went. And we were coming home. It was only 10 minutes from where we lived. It was dark, and my sister was holding my brother's hand, and I was holding his other hand, and we were walking home singing. And we came to a dual carriageway that we had to cross, and a drunk driver drove up on the footpath. I saw the headlights coming, and I got my little brother behind me. The car hit my sister first, and then it hit me. But I was still holding my brother's hand, and when I went through the air, I pulled him with me. I landed on the island in the middle of the dual carriageway. I sat up on the road and looked down, and my leg was nearly in 2 halves on the road. It was all twisted and just broken in 2 halves on the road. My brother was lying beside me. He had hit his head off the curb. He was unconscious, blood flowing from his head. And my sister was a couple of feet away. And they told me afterwards, like, she looked for me like she was dying, and every bone in her body was broken.
Oh my goodness.
A priest came on the scene, and he anointed the 3 of us, and we were taken away in an ambulance. And I ended up, my sister was very severely injured, brain damaged, and she died on Christmas Day, at 1 o'clock on Christmas Day, 2 days later. My parents were devastated. My brother regained consciousness after 24 hours, and he went home from hospital within a week. He had a fractured skull. I spent the next best part of a year in and out of hospital. I missed a lot of school. At one stage I had surgery on my leg, and then at one stage I was in plaster from my chest down to my toes. I couldn't move because I got an infection in the bone, and
oh goodness,
they had put a pin in my leg, but it kept coming out up through my hip, so I had to take it out. And when they took it out, the bone apparently telescoped and it knitted like that. So when everything was, I had a cousin who was a priest, and he was in America, and he came home for Christmas that year, and he kept telling me how much Jesus loved me. I had great devotion to Our Lady, but not so much to Jesus. He kept telling me how much Jesus loved me, and he gave me my first Bible, which I read from cover to cover. And I had plenty of time. I was in hospital, and he just kept telling me, he was very good to me, looked after me, and my spiritual side of things for me. I eventually got out of hospital, and I had one leg shorter than the other. So
because of the telescoping?
Yeah, because of the telescoping, yeah.
Okay.
So I had to wear a correction, that's what they called it, on my shoe, which was to make me balance, because I was limping, so just to make me balance.
Yeah, so what was the difference in the
one
leg to the... I
have my shoes here, so I will show you. It was 1.25 inches. Wow. One leg was 1.25 inches shorter than the other one. So there was the shoe I would buy, and then I would have to get this put on.
Yeah, extra
put on. You had to stop.
Yeah, and then that would make your legs even.
That would balance me, make my legs even. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Right. So for every shoe that you had from that age onwards.
Now these shoes, I always had to buy very sensible shoes. But I was going out one night and I had a nice dress, and I asked the man to lift on these shoes, and he said, "No, I can't. It'll come off." Yeah. So I begged him. I said, "Doesn't matter. I won't blame you. It comes off." And he did it, and I still have them. It never came off.
Right. Yeah.
So they're the shoes I kept.
Yeah.
So I just wear that on my shoe. Anyway, wanted to be a nurse, always wanted to be a nurse. So when I was in school, did my leaving cert, that was our state exam.
Yeah.
And I passed that, but no hospital in Ireland would take me because of my leg.
Right, yeah.
They couldn't. So I think they would nowadays, but back then, the 70s, they wouldn't do
you had
that.
to be really
fit.
up to standard, yeah.
So I went to work for the civil service, and I just didn't like it at all. But I was suffering of trauma because I was missing my sister, and I was depressed. And so I didn't stay there very long. And then one night, my cousin, who was the priest, brought me to a prayer meeting, and I felt, oh, I've come home. I just had this beautiful feeling, and it was really nice. I eventually left the civil service and went to work for my father, and I didn't like that either. And eventually I got married, and all the time I just prayed the rosary every day. And
your faith stayed strong.
Oh, very strong.
All that trauma.
A lady was my special friend.
Yeah.
I prayed to her all the time. Yeah, and even the night on Christmas Day when my sister died, my parents didn't tell me until the next day. And on Christmas night, I remember saying the rosary and begging Her Lady, please don't let her die, please don't let her die.
Yeah.
She was already dead at this stage, I didn't know. Then I got married, and I had my first little boy after 10 months. And they discharged him from the hospital as a perfectly normal, healthy little boy. And when I got him home, I realised that he wasn't. He was screaming all the time, going blue, wasn't feeding, wasn't putting on weight. Brought him to the doctor, and the doctor said, oh no, he was born in the National Maternity Hospital. They wouldn't discharge him if there was anything serious wrong with him, he was fine. And this continued, brought him to another doctor. Another doctor said to me, no, you're just an over-anxious mother.
Even though he was losing weight and blue and everything? He was having
weight and blue, and I said, I said, no, I had older brothers who had children, I looked after them, I wasn't an over-anxious mother, I loved being a mother. Yeah. And I actually became an anxious mother at that stage. Yeah. The third doctor eventually, 3 doctors told me I was over-anxious. Eventually I got the doctor to listen to me. And my son was nearly 3 months at this stage. And he said, I want you to get into your car and drive to Crumlin Hospital, which is a children's hospital, as fast as you can get there. There's a doctor waiting for you there. So it was 5 o'clock in the evening, and there was a consultant waiting at the door for us. Now I thought, this must be serious. The consultants don't stand at the door waiting for you. Yeah. So I went in, and they put a stethoscope on my son's heart. His name was Owen. They put a stethoscope on his heart, and the doctor said to me, I'm afraid your baby has congenital heart disease. And I said, what's that? I was only young, I didn't know what that was. And I said, oh, if you keep him in hospital, I'll have to stay with him. I can't bear to be away from him. And they brought me into a little room, side room, and they said to me, your baby's going to die. I was devastated, hysterical almost at this stage, and they did some tests on him, and then they said after all they had done tests, we'll keep him in, we'll try and stabilise him, and then maybe we'll do some surgery that might keep him alive. So they kept him in for 10 days, they put him on medication because they told me he was having pain, like he was having heart attacks.
Oh, right, yeah.
So they put him on medication, and for the first time in his little life, he was able to smile. He had no pain, and he was smiling at me. Yeah. And then they wanted to do the small operation on him, and I carried him to the theatre and gave him in, and he didn't survive the operation. He died after 10 days. After entering the hospital after 10 days, he died. Yeah. I remember holding him in my arms when he was dead, and I just thanked God that I was the mother of such a beautiful little boy. And I knew that I was devastated, but I knew that Our Lady, our Blessed Mother, knew how I felt because she held her dead son in her arms as well. And so the doctors told me then that I could go ahead and have another baby. It wasn't genetic. Yeah. It wasn't, I didn't drink, I didn't smoke. Yeah. So they said, you can go ahead, that would be chance in a million of this ever happening again. So a year later I had my second son, Colin, and he was born exactly the same way. And the minute he was born, they actually rushed him. A priest came to baptise him, and he said to me, what do you want to call him? And I said, Colin. And he said, what's his second name? Give him another name. He was kind of rushing me, and I was crying, and all I could think of was that I love Matthew's Gospel. So I said, okay, I'll call him Colin Matthew. So they took him to the Children's Hospital, and they said he needed major surgery, but that I could have him home for a few months, maybe a year, build him up, put him on medication, then they'd do open heart surgery on him when he was a year old. So I took him home, and after 3 months he went into heart failure. So I rang the hospital, and they said, bring him in straight away. So I rushed into the hospital, and they said they'd stabilised him for a month in the hospital, and then they said they'd have to do the operation, the surgery. So they operated on him on Spy Wednesday, and every prayer meeting in Ireland was praying for him. And the night before his surgery, a woman rang me from Queensland in Australia. I didn't know this woman, but I had a friend living out there, and she told me that every prayer meeting in Queensland was praying for him.
Wow.
So my cousin came in as a priest. We prayed around his bed. My cousin's name was Jack McCardle. We prayed around his bed. I carried him to the theatre, and they operated on him. And it was the best result they ever had in that hospital of this particular surgery.
Thank God, my goodness.
Within 5 days, he was out of intensive care, and within 10 days, I had him home.
Wow.
He's 34 now, big Man United fan, and loves his football. And
but what a witness of faith that you had, you know, because sometimes when people have these traumas, they turn away.
Yeah, yeah.
And you've got the fruit of so many
Somebody
people's prayers.
said to me, how did you not start drinking or taking drugs? And I said, the rosary is my Valium, the rosary is my alcohol. I just say the rosary.
And you were really fed
I say the rosary, and the rosary calms me. The rosary always calmed me, even as a child. If I was upset, the rosary calmed me. Yeah. So the doctors told me then that I couldn't have any more children, that all my children would be born like this. So again, I prayed to Our Lady every day, prayed the rosary 3 and 4 times a day to Our Lady, and a year later I had my 3rd son, and he was fine, he was okay. Then the doctor said to me, please don't take any more chances. You're going to have more babies like this. So again, I prayed to Our Lady every day. And 2 years later again, I had my daughter, and she was fine.
Oh, very good.
So when my daughter was a year old, an acquaintance of my husband came to the house and said she had a free ticket to go to Medjugorje. We had very little money. We had 3 young children, and I couldn't afford to go to Medjugorje. And she said she had a free ticket, and would I like to go to Medjugorje? Wow. And I said yes. The war had started. It was 1991. The war had started. I was leaving
That's probably why you had a free ticket.
Yeah, I was leaving very young children behind.
Yeah.
And I was very, very anxious.
Yeah, to leave them.
I knew it was going to be very hot here, so I bought a pair of sandals. And I didn't have time. She didn't give me enough time. She only gave me a week's notice or something. Yeah. And I hadn't got time to get the lift put on the sandals.
All right.
But I thought, nobody knows me out there. It doesn't matter if I'm limping.
So you'd limp.
Yeah. So I went out, and I came here. I was highly anxious leaving my children. Yeah. When I got here, I was walking around. I thought, is Our Lady really here? I'd feel something if she was. Yeah. And then I realised I wasn't feeling anxious anymore. I wasn't worried, and I hadn't even thought about the children. I felt this peace that I hadn't been used to came over me. So we were staying in the house with one of the families, and we were having dinner, and I said to my friend, I want to go down to the church. I really want to go down. I want to see something happening, the sun's spinning or something happening. So I went down to the church, and it was packed. You know, every family, like back then, every family in this parish was in the church. That's all they had. They didn't have the outside space.
Yes.
So
it's 1991.
1991. Yeah, so I stood at the door, going up into one of the terraces where the visionaries used to go in. There was crowds of people there, and everybody was saying the rosary because it was loudspeakers, and we were listening to the rosary and we were answering the rosary. And I saw the visionaries going into the room, and then when they ring the little bell, the chime, letting you know that Our Lady is actually appearing now, I couldn't move, and I just prayed to Our Lady, and I said, Blessed Mother, I don't want anything. I don't want to see the sun spinning in the sky. I don't want to see any miracles. You don't have to prove anything to me. I know you're here, and I'm just so grateful to be standing here. And I really was. I never felt such gratitude in my life. I just wanted to stand there and just feel her presence. That's all I wanted. And when I had said that prayer, I got this burning in my leg. Real hot heat in my leg. Now, it wasn't a sensation. My leg was actually burning. Yeah. This heat was running down my leg slowly. It started here, moved very slowly down my leg. I started to rub my leg, try and make
it. Was it painful?
It wasn't painful. I can't think. Just heat, really strong heat. Yeah. I was getting frightened. I thought there was something happening to my leg. I started to rub my leg, try to make this go away, and it wouldn't go away. I started to look around the crowds around me. I thought they were sticking hot needles in me. I don't know why. I just felt like these hot needles were going into my leg, and everybody was just praying the rosary. So when the apparition was over, then they used to open the door to let people into the gallery of the church to fit more people in for Holy Mass. So I said, if I get up that stairs and I sit down, this will go away and I'll be okay. So I got a seat and I sat down, and the burning didn't go away. My leg was still burning.
Stayed through the Mass?
No, even before Mass started. I looked down. Yeah. after a few seconds, and my two knees were together for the first time in 18 years.
Oh, wow.
I was limping longer than I was ever walking properly.
Yeah.
And I started to move in the chair, try and make my leg go back. Normally, it'd be
You'd
like
have one
this.
knee forward,
Yeah,
and one,
yeah,
and that
one
would
leg.
be, that would be the.
I tried moving around the chair to make my leg go back to the way it was, and it wouldn't go back. Then I just stretched out my two legs like this, and my 2 feet were together perfectly. I started moving around the chair again, trying to make my leg go back to the way it was, and it wouldn't go back. So I got mass, received Holy Communion, and my leg was still burning. It eased a bit, but was still heat in my leg. Came out of the church, and the woman I was with came up behind me because we'd got separated, and she came up behind me and she said, I went to her and I actually couldn't speak. I couldn't say anything. And she said, come on, I know something's happened. Come on, we'll walk back to the house. And I started to explain to her what happened. And I lay on the bed and I said to her, are my two legs the same length? And she said, yes. And I said, honestly, now, are my two legs the same length? And she said, honestly, she said, I promise you, your two legs are the same length. I hadn't even slept in Medjugorje. I'd only arrived.
You just arrived.
I just arrived, yeah. And I remember going to tell the priest who was doing who remained nameless, came to hold him, and I don't think he really believed me. He said, don't tell anyone for 3 months. And I said, but all my family, I'd already rang home and told them at home, like my family, you know. So then I started to doubt myself, and I'd been seeing this guy walking around the church, and I knew him. He'd been a friend of my brother-in-law, and he was discerning a vocation, and he was walking around, and I bumped into him, and I told him what happened, and he said, you know, I saw you, but I didn't come up and speak to you, he said, because I didn't think it was you, because you were walking perfectly, and I thought that couldn't possibly be you. You were walking the way you were walking.
Yeah,
you know?
There was no limp.
Yeah, there's no limp. So that confirmed it for me then, you know.
Yeah.
So I came home from Medjugorje after 7 days this year. I came home and went to my doctor and told him what happened. And he measured my leg. It's the longest I was ever in a doctor's office. He measured my leg. He questioned me over and over. Tell me again what happened. Then eventually he said to me, I'm a believer, he said. I'm a believer. It's divine providence. I cannot explain it any other way. So then that night I went home and he phoned me again and said to me, I can't believe it. Tell me again what happened. Yeah. So after that, I travelled around Ireland. Father Slavko came to Ireland maybe a year or so later, and he was going for a conference in Ballinasloe, it's a place in Mayo, or in what's called Westmeath, and I went with him and gave my testimony there. I gave my testimony in several places around Ireland, and even here, like in some of the houses I would stay in here, I've given my testimony as well. Yeah. So then I was working, had a job working when my children went to school. I got a job working because I hadn't come back because I had no money. Yeah. So I got a job, and one day I was on my way home from work. My daughter was about 6 at this stage, and I was driving, and actually a big van was coming this way. And he was a medical rep, and he was going into a doctor's surgery, and he gone past it, and he realised he had passed it, so he turned really quickly. He crashed into me. I swerved across the road, and there was a car coming this way and crashed into me as well, and sent me spinning. And I hurt my neck. So eventually I had to give up my job. I couldn't work with children with special needs because every time I was doing anything with them, I was damaging it more. So I prayed. I said, what am I going to do now? I prayed to Our Lady. I prayed to Jesus. I'd come to know Jesus really well. Mary always leads you to Jesus, always. And Jesus has become my hero. And I prayed, and I went to university. I got a grant from the government. I went to university, and I did a degree in theology and psychology. Yeah. And then I did a master's in theology and healthcare chaplaincy, and I became a chaplain in a hospital. And I always think God always has another plan. I wasn't a nurse. I always wanted I wasn't a nurse, but I was working with people who were dying. I was working in palliative care and oncology. I told many people to come here who were sick, and they came. They came to Medjugorje. Yeah.
Goodness.
And I would tell them my story, and they would say, "Oh, I'm going to Medjugorje."
Oh, what a witness! And there you are, with the people who have the least hope.
Yeah.
You can be a light over there.
Yeah.
Oh, he's a fabulous witness.
Now my children, my first son, my middle son, Fikra, he developed epilepsy when he was 14 and went on medication, and he's doing very well. He's actually a scientist now in the University of Massachusetts. He's doing great. My son, who has a heart disease, he developed epilepsy when he was 19. So he'll be on medication for the rest of his life, and he may need a heart transplant at some stage.
Yeah.
And my daughter developed epilepsy when she was 17. She's now a social worker. So I just pray, and God takes care of everything.
Yeah, that's
they're
it.
doing very well.
It's not a life without crosses.
No, it's not a life without crosses.
You carry your cross with faith, with that gift.
Because I feel that no matter what cross you have to carry, if you just say to Jesus, if you just say, yes, I will carry this cross, I promise you, he will carry it for you. He will take it up and he will carry it. All you have to do is say, I will do it, and he will do it for you.
Oh,
you know, so.
Yeah, thank you so much for that witness. It's going to give a lot of people great hope. And God bless you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.